On September 14, 2008, approximately 11:50 in the morning, myself and one of my officers were doing an escort for a charity event. We had a pickup truck traveling the opposite direction, lost control, struck my officer head on. He sustained injuries to himself. We actually had to start life-saving techniques to try to bring him to life. Once the ambulance arrived, they continued to work on him, and it was pretty much determined at that point that it was a fatal crash. I immediately had to go into the aspect of making notification to the family. The most important thing is to try to get to the immediate family members immediately, as soon as possible, before any news clippings go out. The word of a line of duty death travels very quickly through the community. So getting to the survivors is probably the most vital part of a line of duty death notification.
There's always issues today with social media, and you have to watch out for how that gets out. A lot of times police radio gets picked up on a scanner, and you would have some news reports. Again, it's very, very important to protect the name of individuals and the incident until the immediate family is notified.
And I was able to make the death notification to my officer's mother on the scene. The officer's mother got to spend time with her son, and then we immediately, a couple other agencies assisted. We packed up and moved over to notify the officer's wife and daughter. When you make a death notification in a line of duty death, first thing, you have to make it in person.
What I would establish first and foremost is the response. Once there is a death notification to be made, you must do a personal, face-to-face response.
If it comes from another source, that can affect the survivors for the rest of their lives. So making an adequate death notification in person, on time, by officers that generally the survivors know is a very critical part in a line of duty death notification. We then made adequate resources to notify the rest of the immediate family. There were two sisters involved. One was out of the area, which we had to access the agency where they resided, and we asked that agency and gave them all the information. They made the death notification in person for our agency. Our situation occurred right before noon on a Sunday, and a lot of people were out and about, so we didn't have a lot of time. It wasn't a situation where it happened in the middle of the night.
You should be very cautious of the terminologies and some of the words that you use. Honesty is the best policy. You can't sugarcoat a death. That's not easy. Been to dozens of these, and I could tell you that best presented are by people with empathy. You have a commander that has empathy, you're with someone that may know the family, you have a chaplain, and you have a mental health person or an EAP, an employee assistance person, to give some of that support during that time.
During this whole process, I've been talking about our officer, the officer that we lost. Not only was he an officer, he was a good friend, but he also was my son.
There is always two sides with every death notification. The side that has to deliver the message, and then there is the survivors.
March 22nd, 2002. I awoke, and my son was getting ready for work. I said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "Well, I got called in and I got to go to work." That's the day that he went to work, and he never returned back home.
We went outside, and there stood the state's attorney and the deputy chief sheriff from Toulon.
And I said, "Can I help you?" And I looked in here. They come up to me, and they started talking to me. And I looked at them, and I seen one was a deputy or chief deputy, and I didn't know who the other guy was at the time. And I said, what do you do, get in a wreck, or what happened? I says, "Is he all right?" And that's when they broke the news to me out there on the front porch area that our son was shot and killed that night.
My father was Police Officer Henry J. Stewart of the Suffolk County Police Department in New York. He was killed in the line of duty on July 11th, 1992. He left behind my mother and myself, my two brothers, Jimmy and Chris. We were notified, how do I explain? I was actually out at a party with my brother, Jimmy, and I was coming home to ask my parents to change, if I could switch cars to take a girl that I was dating home a couple of towns away. And when I got onto my block, I noticed there was a lot of police activity. And I had a very bad feeling that it may have involved my father, just because of stories he had told me in the past, that when there's just a lot of lights, a lot of activity, almost too much activity, it usually means there's an officer involved.
Our son is Wildlife Conservation Officer David Grove. On November 11th, 2010, he was patrolling over in Adams County on the other side of Gettysburg. He had shots fired from a vehicle at 1038 Cumberland Township, pulled up, and they saw David laying there. He was already shot and killed, and the suspects fled.
We were in bed sleeping, of course, at 2:30 in the morning. I had just taken the dogs out to go to the bathroom and just got back in bed, and I saw some flashing lights come in the bedroom window, and I wasn't sure what that was, but I wasn't real alarmed or anything. And then next thing we heard a very loud knock on the door, and so Dana went down to the door, and he saw the uniformed officers, and he said, "Oh, it's just David," thinking that it was our son, because he sometimes would do that in the middle of the night. If he had a big case or whatever, he'd be excited and stop at the house. And then when he opened the door, it wasn't of course David.
As we were walking up the block, I saw both my mother and my brother coming back up the block the other way, crying. So I knew something had happened. So speaking with my brother Chris, he said that someone came after Dad, and he was just bawling. We were told at first that my father was okay. He was being operated on, or they were, you know, trying to treat him. No confirmation whether if he was dead or alive. But when we got to the hospital, we were notified. I guess it was about, I want to say it was about 3 a.m. We waited a very, very long time. And, you know, the doctors came in and pronounced him dead. The official time apparently was 12:54 a.m., but we found out much later than that.
So I kind of sat down on the arm of the chair, and they didn't say he was killed or that he was dead. They said he didn't make it. But I knew in my mind that's what they meant.
4 officers from the Pennsylvania Game Commission who came in. I recognized 3 of them. The one used to be David's Wildlife Conservation Officer over in Franklin County when David was a deputy there. He's the one that notified us what happened 4 hours previous when David was killed. At that time, our heads were swimming, didn't know which way to turn.
You really need, as a department, an officer, someone needs to stay with them, especially some parents are elderly. They could have a heart attack over the news. You don't know. Just don't leave us.
We were told then, basically, the officer said, no, you're not going by yourself. We'll take you anywhere you want to go. And so they brought us over to Gettysburg, and we met various officers there. We met Kim Wigan there. We met, I think there was a pastor from over in Gettysburg from there. I met the Adams County coroner. And really I could say from the time we were told at 2:30 in the morning that even now we haven't been left alone as far as our support's still there. When I hear people who have deaths in the family, you always hear about the situation where 2 or 3 months after somebody dies, they're alone. That's not us. And it's a good thing.
We've been to time and places where the officers have ran away when they seen us coming, because either they didn't know what to say to us, and that's very hurtful to anyone, whether it be a sibling, a parent, or anything else like that. We have our needs, as far as I have a tendency to go up to an officer and hug him.
We had been in touch with a police psychologist who was going to help us along to kind of help us start with our grieving. And the one thing that I still think about today is that we had never really gone as a family for any sort of counseling. We had all gone on separate occasions. We had our own ways of dealing with our grief, you know, whether it was to go out drinking or partying or staying home and sulking or whatever the case may be. I myself, my brother, we each had a girlfriend. You know, I spent a lot of time with her. We attended our first police memorial service for Suffolk County during Police Week, and it was then that I began to see what surviving families and the support that they would receive was all about.
The support we had for is, it's hard enough to bury your child. But I can actually say all the way through it with the Game Commission and with the local law enforcement, it made the burden so much easier.
So just to reiterate a bit, you absolutely should have a policy and a procedure in writing. It should be certainly acceptable and signed by your commanders, and you should be trained on this. When people ask me sometimes how many people have you trained, my belief is that it doesn't hurt a whole department to have some type of training on what a line of duty death would be like, because you never know when you're going to be needed for that. There are times where you would be approaching a home for the notification, and someone within the team may not feel as empathetic, or may not be in a place, let's say, emotionally, to present the issue or to be supportive to the issue. That has happened a few times. And in situations like that, it should not be a major issue to ask the person to step aside. You don't need to be forcing people in. That comfort zone that they may or may not have could have an effect on the family. So it is something you want to look out for. We've been coached. That's part of what happens. While I would be responding to a line of duty death, I would usually go with the commander that was always going to present the death notification. That way you get to prep them a bit on certain words and things that they should use and shouldn't use. You do want to be in that location, you know, as soon as possible, minimizing any type of social media attention to do that notification.
For more information regarding death notifications, you can refer to the Cops Quick series, which you can order online at www.nationalcops.org or contact the National Office 573-346-4911.